Well, I think number one, you have to think about Dak Prescott because he's been hurt a lot in recent years. And, I think right now the focus has to be, can he play a full season? He's later in his career. He's had leg injuries.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday. That means Professor Greg Cosell from NFL Films University is in the house, and we are starting our critically acclaimed division by division preview series, right? So today will be our NFC East preview, where Greg's just going to tell you what he's seeing, what he's thinking about, what he's looking for, what interests him for all four of the teams in the NFC East. As always, after that, I will get to some of the news of the day. We got 3 veterans signing contracts. We got a guy that's just going to give up $500,000 for no reason. I've seen that before. I'll have a comment on that a little bit later. And hopefully I'll have time at the end of the show because I do have winners. Those of you that have gone the extra mile, whether you're just spreading the word via social media at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. I see you when you comment. I see you when you quote post. Or you took advantage of some of our sponsors, which is amazing. Or you just made a comment on YouTube. The comment this week was, nice haircut, Jack. That means the guy actually pays attention. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Please, RRSS, rate, review, subscribe, share. It's Greg Cosell time. It's Big Show time. Greg is presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly.
The Big Show.
Okay, Greg, let's start out with the NFC East today. And listen, we are not making predictions. I actually, in August, will go through and put a projected record on every team. But that's not what I'm looking for from you, Greg. What I'm looking for is just some insight as to what you think is really interesting about this team this year. Today is NFC East. We'll start, alphabetical order. Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys, who have a new head coach and thus a new play caller on the offensive side of the ball. And what's the first thing that jumps out to you when you think Cowboys this year?
Well, I think number one, you have to think about Dak Prescott because he's been hurt a lot in recent years. And, I think right now the focus has to be, can he play a full season? He's later in his career. He's had leg injuries. Apparently he's in the best shape he's been in. But that would be the first thing. The second thing to me is their offensive line. They are really hoping that Tyler Guyton, who they drafted with their first pick a year ago and was clearly not ready to play left tackle in this league, can be their starting left tackle. Because it's really difficult. At this point in his career, Dak Prescott is pretty much a pure pocket quarterback. And without a left tackle that can pass protect one-on-one, as you know, Ross, the litmus test in this league for offensive tackles, and certainly for left tackles when you have right-handed quarterbacks, which pretty much they all are, is the ability to pass protect one-on-one on third down and in pure pass situations. Brian Schottenheimer is an offensive-minded coach. He does not want to have to keep a tight end or a back in as part of his pass protection in those critical high-leverage down and distance situations. So those on offense are two things that immediately come to my mind when I think about the Cowboys.
Couple things. I saw where Brian Schottenheimer said that Dak Prescott is in developmental mode, which I thought was interesting. I guess because it's a new offense. I wasn't exactly sure what he meant by that. I mean, he's the highest paid player in the league. So I don't know that fans want to hear that he's in developmental mode. I'll just say this, Greg. You go back to his time, certainly with the Jets and Rex Ryan and Mark Sanchez, and then my time with Brian Schottenheimer and his father Marty in Washington 2001, what they went on to do with the San Diego Chargers. He wants to run the ball. He was brought up that way. He believes in running the football. I think they will have a real commitment to trying to run the ball at, more than they have in recent years. What I find fascinating about that, Greg, is I'm not sure they really have a very good back.
Well, it's interesting you say that because they signed Javonte Williams and they also signed Miles Sanders and they drafted Jaden Blue out of Texas. Javonte Williams, a few years ago, when he came out of North Carolina, looked everything like a feature foundation back in this league. And very early in his career, maybe year one with Denver, he had flashes that he could be that guy. And then he had a major knee injury, and he hasn't really looked the same since. But his traits, assuming they're still there, that's hard to know, but assuming the traits that he showed in college still exist within his body, he does have foundation back talent. Now, Jaden Blue is a fascinating draft choice. He was a fifth-round pick. He's a smaller guy, but he is super explosive. And again, I'm not sitting here saying he's Jahmyr Gibbs, but in the context of an offense, I think he can be deployed similarly. Now, I don't think he's not going to carry 200 times for sure, as Gibbs did last year because Montgomery got hurt. But Blue can be used in that sort of similar way where he can carry the ball, be explosive, and he's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. So really the key, and you're 100% right, I think one of the main keys as well, in addition to what I mentioned, is can Javonte Williams at least be somewhat of a foundation back. He doesn't have to have 320 carries, but they need him to be sort of a meaningfully dominant force as a runner.
The other thing that's interesting about me, what I said about them wanting to run the ball, Greg, is the trade for Pickens, because now they have CeeDee Lamb, they have George Pickens, they have Jake Ferguson. Their skill position weapons certainly seem to be better.
Yes.
At as the receiving options than their running backs. It's interesting too because Pickens reminds me a little bit in terms of personality to a receiver we had my rookie year in Washington with Marty and Brian and Michael Westbrook, which is to say you're not always sure what you're going to get from the guy.
Right.
But talented. So that part of it's interesting. I thought they made a statement about who they want to be when they took Tyler Booker with the 12th overall pick, Greg. They could have taken a lot of other guys there, defense, skill guys.
Good point.
That was hey, we are going to be bullies. We're going to run the ball because Booker and Tyler Smith, those are bad dudes. Like they're going to get after you in the run game.
Yeah, and Booker is I liked his tape, but I think he's a certain kind of offensive guard. I think you'll probably see a lot more gap scheme. I don't think he's for instance, I think outside zone type teams would not view Tyler Booker as a great fit. But if you're going to run inside zone, duo, gap scheme, I think Booker's a really good fit. Just one quick comment about Pickens and now CeeDee Lamb is I think what this really does, Pickens is a true boundary X. And Lamb is really, really good as kind of a movement Z in a slot. And now they have those positions really well defined.
Ooh, that's a good point. What about them defensively, Greg? They brought back Dante Fowler.
Yep.
They've got Matt Eberflus is the DC there calling it. We don't know when Overshone will be back from that injury. And obviously, they have Micah Parsons, and we assume they'll sign him. Knowing the Cowboys, they'll give him the most money anybody's ever gotten the day of the first game.
Right, exactly. Well, what's going to be interesting is what they decide to do defensively in terms of coverage. Because last year, they played a very high percentage of cover one, among the highest in the league. And now they brought in Kaiir Elam, who was from Buffalo, who did not work out in Buffalo because he's not a zone corner. And Buffalo played a lot of zone coverage, and he just couldn't get a feel for all of that. But he's a pure man corner. And that's what he did in college. That's what he's best at. And really, right now, he would be I don't know if they see him as the corner opposite Diggs or if they see Bland as that guy. Bland's an interesting guy because he had a lot of interceptions a couple of years ago, but he's not really a great man-to-man defender. He's more
Well, they drafted Ravel, right, from East Carolina, too.
Yeah, and we'll see if he's ready. And he, by the way, that he's a pure press man corner.
Yeah, they got with Elam and him, they got to be thinking a lot of man, Greg.
I agree, but what's interesting there is Eberflus, to me, is not necessarily a pure man defensive coordinator. Now, obviously you change with your personnel because I think Trevon Diggs is also best when he's playing man. So I think you're going to see them play a lot more man coverage than Eberflus has probably played throughout much of his career as a D coordinator in the league. And as a defensive coach in the league. They also drafted the BC kid as a Ruku, who has really good pass rush traits. So, this is a defense that I think has some pretty decent personnel. Obviously, it all starts with Micah Parsons because he's as dominant a defensive individual force as there is in the league.
I just realized, Greg, you and we could probably do the whole show one team.
Yeah, I know.
Instead of doing a divisional preview, we could do a team preview.
I know.
Unfortunately, there's not 32 weeks until the season starts. So let's get to the Giants. My guy, Emery Hunt, who goes to their mini camps, OTAs, said that he thinks it's the best roster the Giants have had with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. I'm curious what kind of jumps out to you for the Giants right now?
Well, I think number one, I think you got to start with the quarterback. Do we know as we sit here, early in June, Ross, do we know for sure who the starting quarterback is? I don't know if we can answer that. They can say a lot of things publicly. That's all fine in early June, but I'm not sure we know for sure who the starting quarterback is.
Can I answer that, Greg, in my opinion?
Sure.
Just being around the NFL for a long time, I think they start Russell Wilson and they see if they can win and be competitive because the GM and the head coach are on thin ice, on the hot seat. If that doesn't go well, then my guess is they put Dart in and hope that Dart shows enough that they can buy another year, because that's usually how it works.
So the question really becomes, even if it is Wilson, is do they have a run game? And, their O-line for years has been a problem. We all talk about Andrew Thomas, when healthy, being, one of the more top-tier type left tackles, but they've really had issues with the rest of that offensive line. So the question is, regardless of who plays quarterback, even if it's Russell Wilson, he's a veteran, sure, but they're going to need to have a meaningful run game. And, Tyrone Tracy, I guess he looks like the number one back right now. They have Devin Singletary. The fascinating player here is Cam Scatterbo, who they drafted in the 4th round. So they need a meaningful run game here, no matter who the quarterback is. The Evan Neal sort of experiment, and he was a top 6 or 7 pick. He's been moved to guard, and there's no sense that he will even start at guard. So, that turned out to be, I guess you call it a bust. I always hate using that word, but so far that's the case. So, offensively, I still think they're very much a work in progress right now. I think it's hard to know exactly what they'll be. There's a lot of questions.
Tell you what, though, Greg, I'm looking at them defensively, and you've got Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns,
yep,
obviously Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau. Just in terms of talent, man, they're up there in terms of the D-line.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And they've got 2 really sort of very solid overlooked linebackers in Okereke and Micah McFadden. And I thought they made 2 really good signings on the back end. Paulson Adebo they got from the Saints, just a really solid corner. He's going to start, obviously, opposite Deonte Banks, who still has tremendous man-to-man coverage traits, and they're, I guess, just waiting for that to show up on a consistent basis. And then there's Javon Holland. And, maybe people in Miami might say, oh, Javon Holland didn't have a great year, and he didn't. But Javon Holland, at his best, and he's still not an old player, Javon Holland at his best is what we call a 5-tool safety. He can do everything you can ask of his safety. You can make the argument that the 2 best 5-tool safeties in the NFL, when they're at their best, are Javon Holland and Fitzpatrick from the Steelers. So, to me, bringing in those two guys was critical. The rookie Tyler Nubin had a really nice year at safety, so they could have a really good safety duo. And I think, too, Holland, Adebo, veteran safeties, I think veteran D-backs, I think they were brought in to try to make Deonte Banks into a pro because Deonte Banks has big-time man-to-man press cover traits.
Greg, you and I both watch every snap the Eagles play because we do a lot of work in the Philadelphia area. They did lose a bunch of players. They still have a bunch of players back. When you look at the Eagles, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. New offensive coordinator. It feels like there's a lot of rumblings, Greg, that they want to throw the ball more than they did last year. And certainly you would imagine they don't want to give Saquon that many touches again. I'm sure that there's a focus to make sure he's as fresh as possible in January.
Well, it'll be interesting because that's the way they started out a year ago, and they had the early bye when they were 2-2, and then they made an organizational decision that, you know what, we need to give the ball to Saquon Barkley and have him run behind the best run blocking O-line in football. So, again, we'll see how that works. The thing, to me, the Eagles are fascinating from a tactical perspective. And I say it this way, and I think it impacts in a number of ways how defenses have to play. And now defenses might have a better feel for it, but again, you still have to stop. And two things. Number one, Jalen Hurts is a big factor in their base run game. So you've got to defend that. And that changes the way you line up your fronts, your second level, and even your third level because of the Jalen Hurts run factor just in normal down and distance situations because he's in the gun on almost every play. And secondly, and I think this is not talked about enough, they are a 4-down offense, Ross. When they get to their 40-yard line, the minus 40 going in, they go for it on 4th down. So if it's 3rd and 9, defensively, if you hold them to, let's say, 7 yards and everybody, gets excited, that's old school football. Hey, it's 4th and 2. The Eagles go for it and they get it. Okay, they're very good on 4th down. So it changes the way you have to approach 3rd down because you can't give them, you can't assume that, hey, if it's 4th and 3, they're going to punt the ball. They're not going to punt the ball. So now you've got a number of other factors to consider because of Hurts' running ability. Now, if you play zone figuring we're going to rally up and tackle, they're going to go for it on 4th and 3. But it's hard to play man because of the Hurts run factor, when it's 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 9. So I think defenses this offseason are going to do a real hard study of the Eagles offense and how to defend against it.
Greg, that's an unbelievable point because what they do is 3rd and 7 or 8, they let you catch it underneath the sticks.
Yep.
They rally and they tackle you short and they put their fist up and they get all excited.
Yeah.
But it's 4th and 1 or 2 and the Eagles are going to go for it. And it's like you just gave them a free 5 or 6 yards.
Correct.
That's a really interesting point. All right. Defensively, they lost a lot of guys, Greg.
Yeah.
A lot of guys on defense. Slay and Sweat and Milton Williams and Nakobe Dean's hurt. But they got a lot of young guys over there.
Yeah. Well, I think that they drafted Andrew Makuba out of Texas in the 2nd round. There's no question they want him to start opposite Blankenship. Whether that happens or not, we'll see how it plays out. Because obviously they lost Gardner Johnson by choice. They traded him. I think the other question becomes who's the corner opposite Quinyon Mitchell, who obviously had a terrific rookie season. So they have 2 question marks in the secondary, and those are important question marks. I mean, they brought in Adoree Jackson, who's a veteran. I think they would go with him, but I think in an ideal world they would love Keely Ringo to win the job. But, again, we're talking in early June. We don't know the answer to that. Obviously Zach Bond had a phenomenal year. We have no idea about Nakobe Dean and the nature of his injury. My guess is he's not ready early. They drafted Jahad Campbell in the 1st round late from Alabama, who's a ridiculously good athlete, not an overly physical player, but the thing that people have to understand, and we saw what Zach Bond did, is in a Vic Fangio defense, without going into the weeds of how they actually do it. Linebackers are absolutely critical in their coverage schemes. They're not just underneath defenders staring back in at the quarterback. They're asked to do an awful lot. And we saw Zach Bond make some incredible plays as a pass defender last year. And Campbell is such a good athlete. So, we don't know if he's going to be ready to be the starter early in the season. Nolan Smith came on. That was a big, big deal for them. So they have some questions, but they've also got some really good players.
Yeah, I was surprised watching some tape recently how good Campbell is in coverage for a guy that was an edge rusher senior year of high school and freshman year at Alabama.
Yeah,
but he was a wide receiver
yeah.
before that, so he kind of has a feel for it. All right, let's get to the Commanders. Greg, Washington Commanders, obviously it was a terrific, terrific first year, and the priority for them has clearly been to upgrade the O-line.
Oh, yeah.
Especially at tackle with bringing in Laramie Tunsil and Josh Connerly with their first-round pick.
Well, the interesting thing here is, obviously Connerly played left tackle at Oregon the last 2 years, and I thought personally that the two most athletic left tackle prospects in this past draft were Connerly and Josh Simmons from Ohio State. But Connerly's going to move to right tackle. I think in an ideal world, they would love him to win the job at right tackle, and then they could bring Brandon Coleman in to play left guard because he's better suited to play guard than tackle in the NFL. And then I think they'd feel pretty good about their O-line. The big question for them, and again, you have Daniels, who, just like Jalen Hurts, gives you that run game element, the design run game element from the quarterback position, which, as I said, changes things for the defense. The one thing they don't have is they don't have an explosive back. I really like Brian Robinson for what he is, but they don't have any explosiveness at the running back position. In some sense, Daniels is that guy. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Deebo Samuel. I think he gives them a lot of formation versatility because that's kind of what he is. He's not a true great receiver, but he gives you a lot of formation versatility.
They went out of their way, Greg, to get bigger on defense. Kinlaw,
yep.
Dietrich Wise, Eddie Goldman. I think they felt like the Eagles ran them over a little bit and that they needed to get bigger up front.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Dietrich Wise. He's a player I've watched for years in New England. I think that's a really big under-the-radar signing. He's a really good football player, Ross. I don't know if you know much about him. He can play D tackle. He can play DN. He's about 6'5", 270, 275. So you line him up at DN, you're big on the edge. He's just a really good player. He's not a pure sacker, so people aren't aware of him. And certainly the last couple of years, New England wasn't very good, so no one was really looking at them. But I thought he was a really critical signing for them.
Love talking with Greg Cosell. Next week, we will do the AFC East as we start on the East side here on our divisional previews. Outstanding stuff, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
I can't believe it's June already, and we're a couple months away from NFL preseason games. Listen, Smirnoff's perfect for the summer, for those preseason games, because Smirnoff, we do game days, even in the off season. Listen, you heard it all season long. The fun doesn't stop now. Smirnoff knows there's no I in football. It's a we thing. Good drinks, good folks. That's what the summer's for, hanging out with family and friends. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com. They have some really cool recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, we got some news around the league. The Jaguars, they signed edge rusher, special teamer Dennis Gardeck. The Lions, they signed center/guard Tristan Colon. And the Chargers, they're signing edge rusher Bud Dupree to a one-year extension.
All right, I'll go in reverse order. The Dupree one-year extension, interesting to me. I think I saw where it's worth up to $6 million. That's a weird contract extension to do now and makes you wonder why. I don't know if they're giving him a raise for this year and rewarding him for what he did last year and giving him more guaranteed money this year. I got to look at the details of that Dupree extension because that's a little bit odd timing to do a one-year extension that's not worth that much money in early June. Cologne, obviously, the Lions needed another guy on the interior after the surprise retirement of Frank Ragnow. And then Gardeck's a fun player, always been fun to watch on special teams and as a situational rusher. When you give him that opportunity, he's been pretty productive.
And one more note, Cowboys corner Trayvon Diggs, he's at risk of losing $500,000 because he's rehabbing his torn ACL in Florida instead of at the Cowboys facility.
Right, so he has a salary de-escalator based on his workout. I got to tell you, Jack, I remember 2002, maybe 2001, 2002, I had a teammate who had a $500,000 workout bonus if they went to 75% of the workouts. So that's 12 weeks, and only 4 of the workouts count. So he had to go to 3 workouts a week for 12 weeks on average, right? 75%. For $500,000 in 2002. He went the first day and didn't go again. I just think to myself, like, how dumb is that? $500,000, like, unbelievable. Anyway, speaking of unbelievable, those of you that go the extra mile, you guys are winners. Like Jason Leach, he made a comment on Twitter, Jason Leach, you're a winner. Or Ed Lane, he sent a confirmation that he used our code at 100flowers.com. Ed's won before, nothing wrong with that. You can be a repeat winner. And then the guy that said nice haircut, Jack, is C. Grover 38. That means you watch a lot if you notice Jack got a haircut. Love it. I think we're done here. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. It is the best Father's Day gift ever, or anniversary gift. I just heard from my guy that one of you just made an order and said you heard it on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. I love it. myfrontpagestory.com, backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.